listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting us spend some time with you. Yes, I said us. She's back.
I'm back.
She has returned.
I have.
And is attempting to monitor and supervise from the tired state that she's in.
Yes.
You know, when you travel, sometimes when you get back, you need a vacation from your vacation. And
I need a vacation from my vacation.
When you're playing with grandchildren, you really need a vacation from your vacation.
It's great to be back, though, everyone.
If you like the things that you hear on this episode, please hit those share buttons, the like buttons, the notifications. You know you know the drill. I think everybody says that at some point in every video, every podcast, everything. So hopefully you know the drill by now. If you haven't been to GiveGod90.com lately, you may want to check that out. Author Jerry Mitchell's, where the books can be purchased. Lots going on everywhere, and I don't know why, but something has come up a few times the last couple of weeks. And specifically, I've had a couple questions about honoring your father and mother. I don't know if there's something on social media about this or what's going on, but usually when I get multiple questions in a short period of time, somebody has read something, seen something, and it piques their interest, and somehow it gets back to me. One question specifically dealt with how to honor someone you never had a chance to meet. And that was kind of, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. The other one was a little bit more complex. The question came from someone who was married with children. They had children of their own. And like a lot of people, they were taught growing up, honoring your parents meant doing the things they wanted you to do, right? The problem, though, for this individual and what they were working through was that their parents, who are only in their mid-60s, so they're not ancient by any stretch of the imagination, they continually call and ask this person to do small jobs for them. Apparently this person, he has a job of his own. He works on average more than 40 hours each week. He has a family to take care of, right? But the parents call and expect him to drop whatever he's doing and take care of the things that, some things they just don't want to do, right? So before we go into that, Myra's going to read that first passage.
Honor your father and mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Exodus chapter 20, verse 12.
Okay. So I'm going to go there. When I was young, my mother used that a lot with me. And she would do it to convince me to do what she wanted me to do, right? I think a lot of parents do that. And but is that really what this verse is implying? I was going to go somewhere, and I'm not going to go there. I was doing something one day. Is that any way to honor your mother? Well, it wasn't anything bad. It was just not what she wanted me to do. It's not really what the verse is implying. The verse is not implying that children have to obey everything their parents say, especially adult children, right? It's quite different. If we look at the word honor, right? We find it is Strong's Hebrew number 3513. The word is kavod. Now, the Hebrew indication, or the Hebrew definition, well, I should say it this way. If you look at the letters, if you just look at the letters indicate an open door to a house. And in the ancient Hebrew culture that this comes from, an open door was inviting, but it carried a great deal of responsibility when you went inside. You had to, I should say you were required by the threshold covenant to pay attention to what the owner of the home wanted done, right? You had to kind of mind your P's and Q's, as they say. Today, though, it has a little different definition, but it means pretty much the same thing. And it's defined as to be heavy, to be honored, to be glorified, to be burdensome, to be weighty, right? Now, the first time the word's used is actually in Genesis 13:2. Abraham had become extremely wealthy in livestock and in silver and in gold. Now, translated here, the word wealthy, rich. He was glorified, right, by having a great deal of wealth. But with that glory was a very, very heavy burden. When you have that kind of wealth, it's troublesome sometimes. You might not think so. You might think, well, if I had all the money in the world, I could do whatever I wanted. No, you can't. When you have a great deal of money, especially at Abraham's time, you had to have people who were helping you care for these animals, and you had to have people helping you do things. He had at least 318 male servants at one time. That's how many he trained to go rescue Lot, right? And what we get from this is that honoring your parents is weighty, it's heavy, it's burdensome. But, it doesn't mean that a parent should use this to entice a child to behave in a certain manner, right? Oh, if you don't take out the trash, you're not honoring me. If you don't wash the dishes, you're not honoring me. If you don't vacuum the floor, you're not honoring me. That's not the intent of this verse. And I don't mean that a parent has been given a privilege to command children, especially once they have moved out of the parental home. If you remember this next couple of verses Myra's going to read, this is important. You want to read that next?
And the man said, "This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for out of man she was taken. For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and they will become one flesh." Genesis chapter 2, verse 23 and 24.
So parents have a responsibility to teach their children while they're in the parental home, teach them to live the way they're designed to live, teach them how to do certain things, and the children have the responsibility to learn as well as take part in the family unit, right? After all, think about it this way. The family is the foundation of the community, and a community is the foundation for a nation. If the family unit is weak, the community is weak, and therefore the nation is weak. But a strong family bond encourages a strong community, and the result of that is a strong nation, right? So you want to read that next passage there.
These words I am commanding you today are to be upon your hearts. And you shall teach them diligently to your children, and speak of them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 6 and 7.
Hopefully that is familiar to you. We are to teach our children diligently, with purpose. We teach them the things they need to know so that when they have a family, that can be passed along as well. Now, sadly, much of this has been lost in our modern times, partially because we weren't taught. We can't pass along what we don't know. Our parents didn't have that information that they needed to pass on to these things, right? They didn't have the information. They didn't know. You can't teach what you don't know. If you want to have a really good understanding of something, to completely understand it to the best of your ability, you need to learn it so that you can teach it, right? If you're going to teach something to someone else, you better understand what you're teaching, especially if that person is a critical thinker. That doesn't mean that they're going to criticize you. It means they're going to diagnose everything you say. They're going to pull it apart and make sure that what you're saying is right. Think about this. If you want to learn to fly an airplane, you really don't want to learn to fly an airplane from someone who has never flown an airplane. The result of that could be very catastrophic, right? Not a good idea. We teach our children to live the way they're designed to live because doing so is probably far more important than learning how to fly an airplane, right? You know, we're only on this earth for a short amount of time. Eternity lasts forever. When I talked about when I talked about honoring parents before, I did it more from the children's point of view. But today, I want to focus on the parent's responsibility, right? If honoring a parent is such a heavy, burdensome thing, then the parent should be doing what they need to do to make that burden as light as possible. That's why Paul writes in this next verse that Myra's going to read.
Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath. Instead, bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4.
Okay. So, the answer to the complex question of honoring our parents after you've moved out of their home and have a family of your own, when you really break it down, it's not as complex as you might expect it to be, right? A parent should not expect a child to just drop everything to do something that could possibly wait for a convenient time. Emergencies happen. They do. Far too often. And that's different. That's different. In an emergency, you want to make sure they're safe. You want to make sure they're healthy. You want to make sure that everything is as it should be, right? But it's different. And in an emergency, you are expected, not only by parents, but by friends, neighbors, and the rest of society to do something. You need to be there to do the things you need to do. But a parent whose child has matured, they're grown, they have a family of their own, you don't stop. You don't ask them to stop whatever they're doing. Oh, can you come change this light bulb? I don't want to stand on a chair to do it. Can you come change this light bulb? It needs to be done right now. That's a mundane task. It can probably wait until, they're off work. Maybe they put the kids to bed. It doesn't need to be done right this second. And parents shouldn't place undue burdens on their children either. We know people, they've basically stopped their lives to move back into the family home after one of the parents passed and take care of the other, right? Even though that person was perfectly capable of caring for themselves. They were not that old. I believe early 50s, if I remember right. They weren't that old. They weren't invalid, no health issues, right? But the person never had a family of their own. Never got married, never had kids, because the parent who passed, laying on their deathbed, pointed at this person and said, I want you to take care of the other parent. You see, the responsibility of the parent should be to make the burden lighter, not to add more weight on an already heavy load. Now, here's where I want to change gears just a little bit and look at an absent parent. An absent parent doesn't lighten the load. It makes it heavier quite often. And it shouldn't. When an absent parent has simply walked away, right? They walked away from the other parent. They walked away from the child. Or the absent parent tries to deny their responsibility. You know, in the United States, we call them deadbeat moms and dads, right? They just walk away. Sometimes, you know, the judges force these children to visit the parent, but, you know, basically the parent attempts to deny any parental responsibility like financial support or making sure the child gets to school on time, making sure they get to a social event or a sporting event on time. And it teaches the child to just, oh, well, mom or dad, you know, they don't have any responsibility. Why should I? They just toss responsibility aside. This is different than when a young child or a younger child loses a parent to death. That's different. And that weight still bears, right? But parents, if you're listening to this, and I hope you are, just because two parents can't get along, they can't live together, doesn't mean that you do not have parental responsibility. So like we like to say today, suck it up, buttercup. Or just do the alternative. Just pay the support, right? Make sure the child is supported financially the best way you can, and just step out of their life. If you don't want them, let someone who is willing to love them, to teach them diligently and with purpose, give them that opportunity. You're not hurting the other parent when you don't support the child. You're hurting the child. It's tough on them. Is it possible even to honor a parent that's abandoned you? This is going to be blunt and to the point because it needs to be said this way. If a parent abandons a child, they're no longer a parent. You don't have to honor them. The child does not carry that burden because if there's no parent, by definition, you are an orphan. And it sounds harsh, I know, and it needs to sound harsh. We know a lot of people whose parents have abandoned them at various ages, and they struggle with the weight of that. And that's a struggle that no parent should place on a child. It's that simple. It's that simple. When a parent chooses to abandon a child, they should no longer be considered a parent. It's that simple. It really is. When you just say, nope, I'm out of here, you're not a parent anymore. You're really not. You're Nothing. You're nothing. There's no weight. There's no weight. There's no honor. Absolutely. You have given up your responsibility, and that removes the responsibility of the child to carry that weight, carry that burden. Biologically, you may be a father or mother, but the reality is you've given up the responsibility. You throw it away. One of the things that we've talked about children being a gift. You've given it back. You didn't want it. And I know that's hard for some to hear. But we have to lose the tradition of our hang-ups when it comes to misunderstanding and misinterpreting the Bible. Because far too often we use those things and we lay guilt on someone for something they have absolutely no control over. No child can control what a parent chooses to do, right? And that kind of gets me to my final point. If a parent asks you to do something that you know is wrong, and I'm speaking more to adult children here, or older children and adult children. If mom or dad says, I want you to go rob this bank for me, you know it's wrong. Don't do it even though they're demanding it. It is not your job, it's not your duty to abide by every decision a parent might make. There's some things parents might do that a child is going to look at and say, this is leading to disaster. No good can come from this. And it usually has to do with one of two things. It's usually either a financial decision or a medical decision. The child may not agree with a financial decision if a parent decides to sell their home, right? It happens. We've seen that often. A child might not agree if the parent says, I'm going to have this medical procedure done. And the child might be looking at it going, are you really sure that's the way you want to go with this? We've dealt with that with all of our parents. Are you really sure that that's what you want to have done? Did you get a second opinion? Or are you just going with what one doctor says? Right? You see, it's not dishonoring them to disagree, especially if you have information that they don't have or they overlooked. Right? You're actually honoring them by hopefully trying to guide them into a more informed decision. Are you sure you're looking at everything you need to look at here? Are you sure that that's the procedure you want? Are you sure that's the direction you want to go? And again, the parent should have a desire to make the burden of honoring them as light as possible. And when it doesn't happen and they make it heavier, y'all aren't going to like what I'm going to say next. The parents are going to be judged by the Almighty Himself. Come Judgment Day. Come Judgment Day, and it will come. Those things will stand out. Those things are going to stand out. Do you realize that honoring parents in Exodus 20 is, as the Creator speaking, He says, I'm the one who brought you out. You're not going to have any other gods in my face. You're not going to bow down to idols. Don't use my name in a meaningless way, and keep the Sabbath. Honor your parents comes right after that. Have you ever wondered why? Why is honoring our parents more important than don't murder, don't steal, don't commit adultery? It's because the burden to worship the one and only true God, the burden to reject idols, the The burden not to swear oaths you don't intend to keep, the burden to keep the Sabbath can be heavy. It can be weighty. The people who were there, the people at Mount Sinai who were there to hear these things, they couldn't bear that burden for a few days while Moses was up on the mountain. They couldn't do it. It is so important to honor parents that it is the first thing mentioned when it comes to relationships between people. It's important because it's the foundational relationship of a family who has children. Our Creator wants us to understand these things. He wants us to understand that by instructing us to honor parents, we honor Him. We glorify Him. And for the parents who teach that, hopefully the parent understands that they have a responsibility. They have that responsibility to make that burden as light as possible, just like the Almighty did. We have a very short list of things we're not to do, which means we are as free as we can be to do as much good as we can do. When you put it in that context, honoring your parents does carry weight, but it's their responsibility to make that burden as light as possible. So parents, don't use this verse improperly. Make sure you do it right. At least get this one right. If you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your kids. Do it for your kids. It is that important. So, until next time.
Until next time.
We do wish you many, many blessings, everyone.
Yes, we do.